Weird Canadian laws. Bagpipe bylaw. Victoria, BC has some pretty extensive regulations governing street performers, including a special section relating specifically to bagpipers, along with rules laying out where and when the pipers can pipe. There is also a legislation stating that a bagpiper can't perform at the same time as another street entertainer whose performance includes bagpipes. Sadly, this eliminates the possibility of ever hearing dueling banjos played with bagpipes. Watermark. Lawmakers in Etobicoke, Ontario are big believers in bathtub safety, so much that a local bylaw states that a bathtub should not be filled with more than 3.5 inches of water. Note to Etobicoke lawmakers, next time you take a bath, fill it with 3.5 inches of water and see how that works out for you. Booze traveler. Thanks to a law dating back to the era of prohibition and bootlegging, it's illegal to transport liquor from one province to another without the permission of the province's Liquor Control Board. This law was relaxed in 2012, but only for wine. Transporting any other booze will place you in Al Capone territory. Low snowman. Surrey's PEI boasts a law making it illegal to build a snowman that's higher than 30 inches, which is 2.5 feet tall. In Surrey, there is apparently less likelihood of a snowman melting than being accidentally stomped under somebody's boot. No purple. If you live in Canada, Ontario, feel free to paint your garage door any color you want, except purple. That's against the law and you'll be fined. This probably explains why Prince never settled down in Canada. Climb down. A typical childhood pastime in the rest of Canada has been outlawed in Oshawa, Ontario, where it's illegal to climb a tree. According to the local bylaw, no person shall interfere with a tree or part of a tree located on municipal property, including but not limited to attaching, affixing, or placing upon in any manner any object or thing to a tree, part of a tree, and climbing the tree. So hurry up and climb down before the cops arrive. Comic book crime. Thanks to an obscure law in the Canadian Criminal Code dating back to the 1940s, it's illegal to possess, print, publish, or sell a comic book that depicts any criminal act. As a criminal lawyer tells Global News, the letter of the law is drafted sufficiently broadly so that virtually any superhero comic book that we're familiar with today would violate the letter of the law. Don't squash the Sasquatch. Although those guys on still on the air TV series Finding Bigfoot have yet to actually live up to the show's title, if they'd happen to come across a Sasquatch in BC, they'd be wise not to harm a hair on its furry body. That's because an obscure law, which may or may not be an urban legend, states that it's illegal to shoot a Mowgli, the nickname for Sasquatch back in the day. However, on a broader scope, current legislation states that all native species of animals in the province, excluding invertebrates and fish, cannot be hunted, which would presumably include Sasquatch, should the mythical beast ever be decided to reveal itself to humans. Ice Cream Sundae. If you're ever in Ottawa on a Sunday and get a hankering for an ice cream cone, whatever you do, don't eat it on Bank Street. That's because eating ice cream on Bank Street on any other day of the street is perfectly fine, but Sundays it's against the law. Slow down. In the town of Uxbridge, Ontario, has speed limits regarding internet speed. In fact, a local law limits internet speed to 56 km. Anything faster and you're a criminal. The 56K speed, by the way, was an average back in the mid-1990s when dial-up modems were all the rage and the concept of Wi-Fi was pure science fiction. So let's assume that Uxbridge is crawling with cyber criminals. Butter up. Prior to 1995, it was illegal to sell yellow-colored margarine in Ontario, thanks to the relentless lobbying efforts of Canada's dairy industry. The goal of keeping margarine white was presumably to make it appear less appetizing to consumers, thus leading them to the warm, greasy embrace of real butter. Colorblind. Having a home with more than 2 different colors of paint will earn you a fine if you live in Beaconsfield, Quebec, where houses should only be 2 colors, or even better, just 1. No cows at home. Well, it's not illegal to own a cow in Newfoundland. It's against the law to keep that cow in one's home like a house pet. It's also illegal, by the way, to drive cattle through the streets of St. John's, but only after 8 a.m. Apparently, Newfoundland cattle drives are more of a late night thing. Mid-air exit. Throughout Canada, federal aviation law forbids a person to enter or leave the aircraft during flight unless the person leaves for the purpose of making a parachute descent. If the passenger is in possession of a parachute, however, making a mid-air jump from the plane can only be done with the permission of the pilot. As for how one would manage to enter an airplane in the middle of a flight, unless you're Tom Cruise in a Mission Impossible movie, it's probably not much of an issue. Parrot problem. In the Victoria neighborhood of Oak Bay, a noisy parrot that talks loudly could result in a $100 fine. Polly want a summons? Small change. Anyone who's ever tried to get rid of some change at the checkout counter had best know the rules, as there are specific limits set to how much can be paid with coins. For example, a federal government website notes that the limit is $25 if you're paying with loonies, $5 if you're using nickels, and if you're trying to get rid of pennies, the maximum legal amount per purchase is a mere 25 cents. Rat trick. In the Vancouver suburb of Port Coquitlam, rat lovers must confine themselves to owning no more than 4 of the critters. Any more than that, and you can expect a visit from the local constable, and hopefully a maid. Don't scare the Queen. The Canadian Criminal Code contains a statute declaring it illegal to scare the Queen. And yes, sneaking up behind her and saying boo would count. The law apparently dates back to Confederation and can be traced to the Britain's Treason Act of 1842, which itself was responding to an incident in which a British man pointed a gun at Queen Victoria but did not fire it. Siren song. Attaching a siren to a bicycle in Sudbury, Ontario is a criminal offense, punishable by a fine of up to $5,000. Bells and horns, they're totally cool. Sirens, not on your life. Keep snakes at home. It's against the law to wear a snake or lizard on one's body in public while within the city limits of Fredericktown, New Brunswick. Snakes and other types of reptiles may only be taken out in public within a glass container. Throwing snow. It was once illegal to throw a snowball within the city limits of Esquimalt, BC. Although that weird law was subsequently repealed, presumably because the local police were getting tired of locking up 8-year-olds. Shirt order. If you hop in a cab in Halifax and see your driver is wearing a t-shirt and cut-off shorts, call 911. That's because a Halifax bylaw requires drivers to wear a shirt or military-type blouse with a collar and sleeves, along with ankle-length trousers or dress shorts, which are worn within at least 3 inches of the knee. Tall grass. The powers that be in London, Ontario are pretty strict when it comes to mowing the lawn. If you let your grass grow higher than 8 inches, the city will come in and cut it for you, and then send you the bill for it. Tied up. It's a bad idea for a teenager to walk down Main Street in Fort Qu'Appelle, Saskatchewan, with untied shoes. Not only is there a good chance the teen might trip over those laces, he or she might also be thrown in the slammer for violating a local law prohibited untied shoes for teens on Main Street. Trough trouble. Do you live in Cobourg, Ontario, and have a water trough in your front yard? Do you fill that trough with water after 5 a.m.? Then you are in violation of a local bylaw that probably made more sense in the days when the horse and buggies were the primary mode of transportation. No whistling. It's illegal to whistle in Petrolia, Ontario between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., so keep your lips zipped. Apparently, this weird law is part of an anti-noise bylaw that prohibits yelling, shouting, hooting, whistling, or singing during the wee hours. Don't paint that ladder. According to Alberta's Health and Safety Code, it's against the law to paint a wooden ladder. The reason? To avoid disguising the condition of a shoddy ladder that's been made to look new thanks to a coat of paint. If a ladder looks old and rickety, it needs to stay that way. Pennywise. Even though pennies have been taken out of circulation in Canada, it remains a crime to deface one, which includes such actions: drilling a hole in it, scratching it with a knife, or that old favorite, leaving it on a railway track so it becomes flattened by a passing train. Stove sales. For reasons that must have made sense at the time, Vancouver enacted legislation in 1947 that made it illegal to sell a stove within city limits, but only on Wednesdays. The law was repealed about 40 years later, meaning stove sellers can flaunt their wares with impunity 7 days a week. Burning Man. If you find yourself in Alberta and are suddenly overcome with the urge to set fire to somebody's wooden leg, don't. Not only is it a pretty creepy thing to do, it's also against the law and will no doubt land you behind bars. Don't move. If you're selling a car and happen to be in Montreal, feel free to put a for sale sign in the window, unless you plan on driving the car, that is. In Montreal, it's against the law to place a for sale sign in a window of a moving vehicle. From the horse's mouth. Speaking of horses, arguably the weirdest law in Canada is still existing in Toronto bylaw that prohibits dragging a dead horse down Yonge Street on Sundays. You want to do it from Monday to Saturday? Knock yourself out. Better pay that bill. If you stiff a hotel in Ontario and sneak out without paying your bill, that hotel has the legal right to recoup its losses by selling your horse. Thank you for listening to our weird Canadian laws.